Welcome back to today's interview section. We've got a fantastic interview for you today with a wonderful guest coming all the way in from Australia, which is great because I'm in Spain. So that's pretty useful that we've got Zoom. So Erin, can you tell us something about yourself?
Yeah, so I am Sydney based. I am married with 3 children. Before children, I was essentially a poster girl for fast moving consumer goods, working for Nestle and L'Oreal and Unilever in Sydney and London. And then after having kids, my world changed a little bit. I just couldn't get myself back into the corporate world. And kind of, I honestly actually didn't really understand the depths of our ecological crisis until a few years ago. And once I've discovered how really bad things are, I have kind of devoted myself to spreading the word. So I just find myself between looking after my kids, trying to get the message out there any way I can. So I have some articles published. I post on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter and anywhere else that I have a means to spread the word.
I know that feeling.
Yeah, that's me.
I can relate on a few levels, with when you have kids, everything's kind of comes to light, and it is that thread on the jumper thing, isn't it? You start reading and it's like, it just keeps coming. And eventually, there's no jumper left. In this case, the jumper is obviously a habitable planet. So
yeah, it's quite astounding the more you read into it. You're like, how could I not know this? How did I not know? What was I doing? And, maybe there was an element of not wanting to know, and maybe having children makes you feel like you can't turn a blind eye to it anymore. But I guess I've made a promise to myself not to be someone who pretends this isn't happening anymore.
Exactly. I find myself, quite often at night with the, falling slowly to sleep with the eco-anxiety kicking in. It's like, I try and harness that from anxiety to action, basically, because yes, it's something to be worried about. Yes, it's something to be very nervous about, but it's also something that we need to talk about. We need to shout about, because otherwise other people won't be able to worry about it in future.
Yeah, and I have to remind myself it's really rational to be worried. When I find that lots of people around me don't care, I have to remind myself that's the irrational behavior. And actually it's really rational to care. And you're right, the only thing for that real anxiety or the you get your heart racing when you remember a fact, the only thing for that is action. If you can do something to make it better somehow, you don't wake up through the night as often. You sleep a bit easier at night, I find. Not always, but mostly.
So the first question, I'd like to know, how do you feel about the Sustainable Development Goals?
I genuinely don't have a strong attachment to them. I've seen them you get kind of the sustainability report from the big blue chip companies, and they report against them. So I know that they exist and I know that they're important. And one of the things that initially made me kind of disregard them as being something serious, is the fact that goal number 8 is economic growth. And for me, that is not a path to sustainability. There is no path to sustainability by continuing to grow our economy. So I'll probably go into this later, but if our global economy grows at 3% each year, in 24 years, it's twice as big as it was previously, which means in 48 years, it's 4 times as big as it was previously. And in 72 years, it's 8 times as big. And I think I'm going into your questions that are later, but we're already breaching 7 of 9 planetary boundaries. We're past the point of being able to double again already. Like, we don't have 24 years to deal with this problem. Like, it astounds me that more people aren't talking about this. Earth Overshoot Day. Earth Overshoot Day is the day of the year at which we've used up all the resources and services that the ecological environment can regenerate in a year. Last year, that was July 29. So for the remaining 4 months of the year, we were stealing from future generations. So why would we want to grow our material footprint further? just doesn't make sense. So sorry. So there's a sustainability goal that relates to economic growth, and for me, that's a really important thing not to do from a state sustainability perspective. So I'm not super attached to them. I've read a little bit of work from Jason Hickel, who's quite prominent in the degrowth movement. And his big concern is that they don't really allocate the goals in a way that really reflects sustainability. So some of the countries that score quite highly, some of the Scandinavian countries, actually just offshore a lot of their ecological footprint to some of the global south countries, and they then look like they're scoring quite poorly. So there's a bit of work to do there, I think, for them to be something that we can really truly use in a helpful way.
Absolutely. I think, as a teacher, using the SDGs, it's a great format to raise awareness about these different ideals, these different fantastic areas. A lot of them are really, really great, but we're now 7 years into it. So that means we're 8 years away from the target. And I like to look at how close we are to actually achieving any of them. And was this just a bit more, governmental greenwashing? Well, not just greenwashing, all the washing, to be honest, because it does cover a lot of areas. Now, we did briefly mention SDG 8 there. I am very much of the same opinion of you. There's two parts of it: it's decent work and economic growth. Now, I don't think every country needs to grow economically. And why is economic growth essential to decent work? Why are these two things put together? I don't really understand that. Do we need economic growth for decent work?
No. So kind of the answer to that from a degrowth perspective is a jobs guarantee provided by the government. So they could literally say, so it's a bit of modern monetary theory, but a modern monetary theorist would say that it's actually really cruel to keep people, a certain percentage of people, in unemployment as a means by which to control inflation. Like, the human cost of that's horrible. And under modern monetary theory, they say no one should be unemployed. And what you could do instead is the government could offer everyone a job at, a living wage. And so that in the times where the private sector can hire, people would move out of those government created jobs into the private sector. And when things aren't going well and the private sector is not hiring, they could move back into a government provided role developed at the community level. So, the government at a federal level is not going to say we need work here, here and here, but my local community might say we need a community garden, and that's your role for the next 3, 6, 12 months, whatever it might be, but it's determined at the local level. So that's a truly needed, important role, meaningful role. And then the other option is, and this is probably a little bit off track, and I find it kind of almost a capitalistic mindset that humans need to work in order to earn their life. This, you got to earn a living. Like, we literally say we have to earn a living. So we go off every day 9 to 5, doing something we probably don't care about. It's why do we have to do that? Why can't we just have all the things we need to live a decent life, like healthcare and education and housing, available to us? So, one of the answers to that might be a universal basic income. And that's something that has been trialed and discussed for a long time. I was listening to someone, his name escapes me now, but he's written a book on universal basic income, and he said there's a 50-50 chance that South Korea might implement this, a universal basic income this year or next year. So, like, some countries are actually really talking about doing it seriously, and that would do a few things. It would enable people to not have to work in jobs they don't enjoy, or they're just doing because they need to pay the bills. It would destigmatize welfare. It's just would take the pressure of people doing these jobs that aren't meaningful to them and give people freedom. So there's this real a lack of time as a resource for people who have to work to get by. People with capital often don't earn their money through wages. They've got more time, whereas people who have to trade their time for money then don't have this time to join activism or, play the guitar or spend time with their children. It's this real resource that's missing from life. So do we need economic growth for good jobs? No. Should we have to work for a decent life? No, possibly not. Maybe that's a different way to look at the problem.
Oh, fantastic. Now, you mentioned degrowth. What is degrowth, or what is a degrowth economy?
So economic growth is basically measured in gross domestic product, and there is a direct correlation between the growth of gross domestic product and the growth of material footprint, and it includes energy. So if you looked on a chart, you'd see them going which way, whichever direction. I might get this wrong in the camera, but they're both going up, and they're going up in step together every year because we are continually pursuing economic growth. And so that is the key reason why our greenhouse gas emissions have gone up 60% since 1990. So from the time the first IPCC report came out in 1990, not only have we not reversed global warming, but we have managed to grow it by 60% because we think that economic growth is this be all and end all. And if we continue to do it, by 2030, our emissions will be, our energy usage will be 30% higher. Whether we're able to deploy renewable energy that takes some of those emissions that relate to that energy away is a different question, but we're just going to make that job of decarbonising so much harder because we're increasing our energy use by so much. What if we didn't grow our economy between now and then? We'd have a better chance of decarbonising. And then what if we even decreased our energy use between now and then? We'd have an even better chance of reaching net zero quicker. So degrowth is this idea that if we reduce our material footprint, including energy, we will go a long way to reaching net zero far sooner than 2050. It's just this other way of structuring the economy so that we're not making this job of avoiding catastrophic climate change harder than it needs to be. And so there's some important concepts to degrowth that we need to make sure we don't leave out of the conversation, and that's you can meet the needs of all within the planetary boundaries. So degrowth would provide people with universal healthcare, universal education, amazing public transport, even quotas of energy and water and internet. All these things we need to live a decent life would be provided, so that we could then start to take all the superfluous things out of the economy, like all the stuff we don't need but comes because we need to grow the economy, obsolescence, single-use plastic, just things that we don't need that go behind that GDP growth.
The planned obsolescence is something that makes me really mad. And then, you can see my Kids Against Plastic sign behind me. I guess you can imagine my feelings on single-use plastic. Something that it's often talked about in terms of, where it is in the ocean. It's not often talked about, the production of it and, the amount of resources we use just to create this plastic. We think, oh, we're killing 100,000 sea mammals a year with this single-use plastic, and not, well, we're also creating all of this plastic that's going to be around for years, which takes an awful lot of energy in itself, and quite a lot of oil as well, which, isn't it great to use loads of oil? I think it's 5% of the oil used in the States is used on making plastic. So,
it's crazy. It's crazy. There was some research released this week by the Stockholm, I think it's called the Resilience Institute. I might have the name wrong, but they've been working on the planetary boundaries, and so there's 9 planetary boundaries, and up until earlier this week, publicly 4 had been breached. They're still peer reviewing 2 more being breached. And at that time, up until this week, plastics or chemical pollution was undefined. And now they've defined it, and it goes off the Richter scale. Yeah, it's just crazy how much we've breached that by. And they said there's something along the lines of double the mass of plastic on the planet as all mammals, which sounds terrible. And then you learn that 60% of mammals are livestock we use to feed ourselves. And so it's like actually way worse than we're even, allowing ourselves to acknowledge. Like, it's just, why do we need all that plastic? I don't even think plastic existed, back in the 1940s, really. Like, it's something that's come on maybe since World War II. It's this thing that we now can't live without, that we all lived without 80 years ago.
Well, yeah, you look at, supermarkets. I remember there was a great history lesson from a very long time ago, and there were like photos of supermarkets in the 50s. And there's no plastic there. There's no plastic. Now, I try my hardest to use as little single-use plastic as possible. But, there are times when you go out and it's like, there are things that is completely unavoidable.
Yeah.
Unless you go, okay, so now I'll have to go across to a farmer's market, which is, an hour and a half away in the car, which I'll then have to drive to get there to make sure I can get this one thing that they have in that supermarket that I really want, but it's got plastic. It's crazy. So
it's crazy.
I'd like to know, what do you think, what is the first step people can make to make a difference? The first step we can take to make a difference?
I once read that the most important thing you can do if you want to help, avoid catastrophic climate change is to talk about it. So, all the individual actions are good and important. I think, I do them, but I almost do them because I don't want to look like a hypocrite. Like, they're done, I'm hands up, I'm trying as hard as I can. But now let's talk about real, system change, which is where we're going to get the solutions. It's not going to be in, I walk my kids to school, but if I drive them sometimes, I try not to feel guilty about it because we're just not set up yet. It has to happen at a global level, at a government federal level. So talk about it, get people to vote for politicians that are going to support climate action. Help people understand that we could live better, happier, healthier lives once we do start to understand that success isn't tied to what we own or what we earn, and actually it's more about, the difference we can make to the world and leaving it a better place. I think we've lost a little bit of our spirit, our connection to nature and others, and we've tied it up into material things, and then we throw those material things away, without a second thought. I think we could be happier people.
Yeah, I think that, I was reading a bit about Dgrowth before we spoke. You've inspired me through many of your posts, and yeah, this idea of, if we maybe started, to spend a little bit less on advertising and marketing and telling people that, you need to have the new iPhone, because if you don't, you're a terrible person and nobody's going to like you. Then maybe if we stop doing that, we stop telling people they need these things, people will stop believing it, and it's something that really gets me down. You have a lot of these companies and big brands with all their greenwashing, saying they're trying to do their best for the planet. And then it comes along to what I refer to as the worst day of the year. Then it comes along to Black Friday, and suddenly nobody cares about the planet anymore. It's just, you can buy these jeans for €3, so buy 50 pairs of them so you can have them forever. What's your opinion on Black Friday, which is obviously now, I think, just November?
Yeah, it makes me feel unwell when I think about kind of the level of I don't know if this is a word, this might be an Australian term, but like giddiness, that kind of excitement people get when they think there's something they can get, a really good deal on, and they must have it. And all I can think of is the damage it's causing, and the emissions that went into that product, and probably the short life that product will have. Or how unnecessary it might be. Have they looked for it secondhand? Do they really want it? Do they not have something at home they could use instead? Could they not share something with their friend? It's a small example, but all of some of my friends in the area, I live near the beach, they all bought stand-up paddle boards for Christmas. It was all just in a chat, everyone was getting them. It's like, why don't you just share 2 or 3? Do we all need one each? It's most of them are going to go unused for, except for 1 hour each week. They'll be sitting in the garage. Is this idea that we all need to own one of everything and we couldn't possibly share things, or
get it secondhand, as
it's
you say,
driven.
because I'm sure last Christmas, a whole bunch of other neighbours in the area were like, let's all get a stand-up paddleboard, and realised a year later that they didn't need it and it was still in their garage.
It's just sitting in the garage.
Could have just bought a second-hand one, because, you know, you're only going to use it 3 times.
Exactly. So yeah, and we get Boxing Day sales here. So everyone, after kind of the hell of shopping for Christmas, everyone backs up and goes shopping again. I just think, what for? It's so crazy. I love Christmas in Sydney. Obviously, it's summertime and we spend a lot of time together as a family. But the whole me needing to buy stuff for my kids, otherwise they think Santa hasn't come to visit them, makes me so resentful. And it's such an, you know, a consumer-driven, you know, concept. And I find it really stressful. Oh, I suppose I'll buy them this because they can't think Santa didn't come to them. You know, like I can obviously say, Mummy and Daddy have just bought you, you know, hardly anything this year. I can't not buy from Santa. So it's this, consumer society, and it is advertising driven. Again, advertising as it exists today didn't exist 100 years ago, maybe even 60 years ago. It's a new industry and it's harmful.
Absolutely, it really is. Now that thing you mentioned about the Boxing Day sales, now about 8 years ago we were over in Australia to visit my brother, and Boxing Day is my wife's brother's birthday, and he worked in the centre, so we popped in to see him, and I was just like,
yeah, it's mad. Yeah, they queue up out the front of the store and wait for the doors to open, and they trample each other to get in. It's really sickening. Like, people often get hurt just so people can get a TV, you know, or whatever it might be.
And it's a month after Black Friday now, so like, what have you not bought on Black Friday? The Black Friday sales that you
what do you still need
the day after Christmas? Like, I need a new TV. Do you? Is 60 inch not big enough? You know, do you actually need a 72-inch TV? You know, do you need that? Do you actually need a 70-inch TV?
Yeah, you don't, do you? Like, your TV still works. Your TV still works. You're just upgrading for no good reason. And, you know, like, this is probably a little bit off topic, but do we all need to watch so much TV? You know, it's mind numbing and it's an escapism, but maybe we don't need to escape. Maybe we need to face into reality.
I mean, I think I find I'm worse with this, that, you know, it sucks me in. And I remember when I didn't have a phone for about 3 weeks, and the number of books that I read, the amount that I spoke to my family, like, just it all increased, everything increased. But that's something entirely different. It's been lovely speaking to you today. Thank you for being our guest. I'm trying my hardest not to sing Beauty and the Beast, Be Our Guest now. I'll make sure I've waited till we stop recording till I start singing that, because nobody needs to see that. It's been great having you on. Where can people find you to learn more about Dgrowth and what you're talking about?
I'm probably most active on LinkedIn. So I'd love to have some people follow me on LinkedIn. That's where I'm at. Brilliant. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
I'll put the link, your LinkedIn link, down in the description box so people can find you. And it's been wonderful. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.